Well, hello and welcome to Beat the Reset. My name is Tim and I am the guy in the hat. And today I wanted to talk to you about the most important monetary asset you can ever own. Before we get started, it's important to note that there are two types of monetary assets. One is physical gold and the other is physical silver. And the first thing that we think of when we think of wealth is we think of physical gold. The only question is, where does that even come from? Where does that sentiment arise from? And the answer to that is it arises from this notion that we have somehow been on gold standards throughout our history. Is that true or is that false? Well, if we go back several hundred years, in fact, if we go back to the Spanish Empire, which was a 400-year-old empire, the first thing you realise is this was not a gold empire. The Spanish Empire was a silver empire. If you go back to ancient Rome, you realise it was not a gold empire. It was a silver empire. So where is this notion that gold is so valuable? Why do we believe that gold is the most important asset to hold and not silver? Well, part of it is because gold is very rare. That is fundamentally where this arises from. Gold is infinitely rarer than silver. Silver, of course, is derived mainly from copper mines, zinc, and so on. It's almost a byproduct of these mines. However, gold, of course, is generally mined in its own right, and there isn't very much of it. And if we have a look at the history of gold, it was mainly used for gilding and used in fine artworks and monuments and so on. Like if you have a look at ancient Egypt and we have a look at Tutankhamun, the way the Egyptians used gold. But fundamentally, as a monetary unit, gold is not really used as monetary units. In fact, most of the gold in the world is either stored in the vaults of the central banks or it's used in jewellery. That is fundamentally the usage for gold. In fact, in our entire history, we have mined just over 200,000 tonnes of gold, 2/3 of which were mined after 1950. So that tells you a lot that most of the gold that we've mined has actually been in the last 50 to 70 years or so. So if we go through history and we have a look at gold standards, the only reason we have had gold standards in more recent times is because of something called fiat currency. But when we were on a metallic standard, or what we call bimetallic standard, there was no real need for a gold standard. And let me explain. If we have a look at the Spanish Empire, the two main coins that were traded were the Spanish silver dollar, known as the piece of 8, and of course the gold coin, which was largely known as a doubloon. The way it would work in the Spanish Empire is, rather than have gold standards or silver standards, because we were dealing in what we call commodity coinage, which was specie, we were dealing in something called bimetallism, in other words, a bimetallic standard. So there was no gold standard, there was no silver standard. This was simply a bimetallic standard. And what we mean by that is that one metal traded against the other in terms of value. And the question is, of gold and silver, obviously gold was the more valuable of the two. But have a look at this. If you have a look at the Spanish Empire, the interesting thing about the gold-silver ratio is that silver was clearly valued much higher when it was a trading commodity dollar. So the Spanish dollar traded at 4-1 against the doubloon. That's 4-1 ratio. That's absolutely incredible. By the time we saw the introduction of the first Coinage Act in the United States in 1792, silver was trading against gold at 15-1 ratio. So the first thing that happened in the United States is they clearly had debased the value of silver straight away. If you have a look at the Spanish Empire, again, 4-1. The United States, which followed on from the Spanish Empire largely, took over from the Spanish Empire. Again, silver trading with gold at 15-1. Very, very quickly, though, the United States in 1834, in the Coinage Act of 1834, moved silver to 16-1. So straight away you see further debasement of silver, which of course is the trading asset of the common man. So remember what I said earlier in this podcast, that gold is largely stored in the vaults of central banks or used in jewellery. It's extremely rare. We mine about 400 tonnes of gold annually. However, we mine about 25,000 tonnes of silver. So therefore, there's a lot more silver. But the other thing about silver is it's more accessible to the common man. In fact, all the coinage of the Spanish Empire, well, the main coin was the Spanish silver dollar. In the United States, at the very, very beginning of the first Coinage Act in 1792, we saw the Liberty dollar. And this was a virtual replica of the Spanish silver dollar. So silver was the trading asset of the common man. And ever since its first Coinage Act, the United States really declared war on silver. It was really the one commodity or the one asset that the United States clearly had in its crosshairs. And we go back to the United States early days in 1776, the Declaration of Independence from the Crown. We then have 13 years later, in 1889, the United States Constitution, which was drawn up with the title We the People. But the interesting thing is, was it really about the people? And clearly, the Treasury was targeting silver right from the very beginning. If you have a look at the Spanish silver dollar, it had more value than the very, very first silver dollar that was introduced in the United States. So the Liberty dollar was slightly devalued in its silver content against the Spanish silver dollar. This made Spanish silver dollars much, much more popular. And of course, the United States didn't have really that much control over the Spanish dollar at the time. So what they did is debased silver against gold. They could debase the ratios by adjusting them slightly. And again, it was always targeted at silver. So here we had the United States in its early days really rising as an economy against the Spanish Empire. And of course, it had the Spanish Empire in its crosshairs, which means it was going after silver. A lot of the silver in the world at the time was mined within the Middle Americas, so within Mexico and so on. And the United States was very keen to either shut it down or get its hands on it, one or the other. So what we saw as we headed towards 1857 is that the United States had clearly decided that the Spanish silver dollar was a problem. Again, silver being the asset of the common man was always in the crosshairs. And as a result, the United States Treasury, largely in the Coinage Act of 1857, completely banned the Spanish dollar altogether, leaving the only dollar in circulation as the Liberty dollar. And the interesting thing is that shortly after that, there was a shortage of currency within circulation in the United States. And in terms of currency, in this case, is actually monetary currency, in other words, specie coin. So silver coinage started to literally disappear. The reason is because the amount that one could get for a silver coin in Europe or offshore was much, much greater than one could get for a silver dollar on the mainland in the US. So coinage started disappearing out of circulation and largely going offshore to Europe. After the removal of the Spanish dollar from circulation and it being made illegal to trade in the US, we then, of course, saw the disappearance of currency, or the silver coinage disappearing, if you like. And as a result, we saw the first paper dollars produced in the United States by the Treasury. They printed something called greenbacks, which were to take the place of silver. Now, this was the plan all along. This was always the way it was going to be for the United States, and that is to remove the purchasing power of the common man, remove the purchasing power of silver, so that the common man was trading now pieces of paper. And that's exactly what happened in 1861. The other thing that happened in 1861, of course, under the presidency of Abraham Lincoln, is the United States went into a civil war situation with the North versus the South. And this was a great cover for not only the complete shift in the currency system and the monetary system. We saw the monetary system move from silver to the first time in 1864 to copper. Now, this was the move, this was the strategy, was of course now that the common man has lost his silver, he's now largely trading copper. So here's the common man, 60 to 70 years earlier, trading Spanish silver dollars, then into Liberty dollars in the US after the Coinage Act of 1792, moving from a 4-to-1 trading ratio against gold in the Spanish Empire to a 15-to-1 trading ratio, which of course is the debasement of silver, to a 16-to-1 trading ratio in 1834, to the complete removal of the Spanish dollar in 1857, to pieces of paper in 1861, to copper coinage in 1864. You can see the gradual progression as the common man is led by the nose ring down the road towards something called not bimetallism, but something called a quasi-gold standard. Because by the time that the common man had got to 1873, the United States all but banned the coinage of silver in the mints. Now, this is fascinating because what this does is it strikes a blow to the heart of the common man. And of course, that's exactly what happened because the common man didn't trade gold. So the removal of silver, or the removal of the ability to be able to take bullion to a mint and have it coined, was problematic for the common man, more importantly. And this is really what had begun to happen, is that the power, or the purchasing power, and the ability for the common man to be able to survive and trade had largely now been completely removed. It took the United States about 80 years to take what was effectively the most successful trading monetary system on the planet, which was the Spanish Empire and the Spanish silver dollar, which traded for 400 years. It took them a matter of about 80 to 90 years to completely decimate the purchasing power of the common man by largely installing a central bank system over a very, very long period of time, which would eventually, of course, completely take over the printing of all currency in the United States by 1913. There were several turning points. Again, I'll just go over them one more time. The turning point, of course, was the introduction of the Liberty dollar in 1792 at 15-to-1 trading ratio. Again, a massive attack on silver. The next one was 1834 in the Coinage Act, a debasement to 16-to-1, a massive attack on silver. 1861 in the United States was of course, the removal of silver out of the monetary system. Silver just seemed to disappear offshore. Again, an attack on silver because silver was replaced with pieces of paper called greenbacks. 1864, the introduction of copper, another attack on silver, of course, replacing what was a very valuable commodity with a much, much cheaper base metal. 1873, under the Coinage Act of 1873, also known as the Crime of 1873 or the Crime Act of 1873, was the banning of bullion being converted to minted coins at the Treasury now, or at the mints, and that's what happened. So the United States went on to something called a quasi-gold standard, which was ratified in 1900 under the Gold Standard Act of 1900. So the United States officially went on to its first gold standard. Now, that's the first one in 1900 right up until 1933. Now, the problem is that the United States had to abandon the gold standard because the whole point of gold standards is twofold. One is to have a currency that's fully convertible, pieces of paper that you can hold that are fully convertible to gold. And the second one is to restrict the expansion of the currency. And of course, in 1913, when the Federal Reserve Act was passed, the Federal Reserve turned on its printing presses. Of course, we went to war, and they forgot to turn off the printing presses. We had the credit booms of the 1920s. We had the crash of the New York Stock Exchange. And of course, in 1933, under Roosevelt, the shutting of the commercial banks because the currency had been debased. The paper currency had been debased so much that not even the gold standard was any use to them anymore. So, of course, the banks were shut down on March 6, 1933, and gold was confiscated very quickly from the common man because it was the only thing that had any value at the time. The currency certainly didn't have any value. But I guess what I wanted to drive here on all of this, or where I was driving, is to help you understand that silver is the most important of all trading assets, and that's why the United States targeted silver and targeted the Spanish Empire so vehemently over such a long period of time. It took them a long time to change the mindset of the people so that they were no longer trading their beloved silver, and that they were moved to either a gold standard, which of course the common man doesn't trade on gold, or they'll move to the paper standard, which is the fiat system that we're currently on to this very, very day. So when silver becomes available, you buy it, and you never stop buying it because it's the number one trading asset of the people. It always will be, and it's the number one asset that ever since the United States, of course, started its first Coinage Act in 1792, has targeted silver in every possible way. And these days, silver is targeted through the commodities exchange and the ETFs and the manipulation of what we call the paper traded silver and gold. So that's really why silver is the most important asset that you need to hold. It will skyrocket on reset, and I have almost no doubt that eventually, at some point, we will see the true value of this incredibly important trading asset, which is, of course, silver. And that is my message for today. So I hope you're looking after your family. I hope you're looking after your friends and your neighbours. I hope you're looking after your wealth. And as always, make good choices.